Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Jeff.
Good evening, all.
Sue.
Good evening.
Hi.
Mayor.
Good evening. Don't see Alderman Weezahan. I think I see everybody else. And Alderman Holman also. So we'll wait a couple minutes, but we got a pretty packed agenda. So I want to start the work session pretty resolutely if we can. I think we might as well go ahead and get started. They can, the two of them can join in progress. And in this work session, I think one of the most important things we want to do first is have a presentation from the management partners on the audit report. And we're fortunate to have with us tonight, Jacqueline McCrae from Management Partners to make a presentation. And I will turn it over to Ms. McCrae to walk us through the report. Welcome.
Well, welcome. Thank you for having myself, and I'm looking for my colleague, Tim Borden, and it does not look like he is in the meeting yet. I'm hoping that he will join us soon. He was our special advisor and actually did the bulk of the analysis for the recommendations. So,
Well, what we could do, if we need to give him more time, we do have a local project, our Topping Road project, and I think Mr. Tim Randick is on, and we could maybe bump him up, and while we wait for your colleague to come online, if that would be okay with you.
that would be great. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it.
Sure. Tim, do you want to go ahead then?
Absolutely, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Get my screen pulled up for you real quick. Just a second. So what I have for the board tonight is a presentation on Topping Road Phase 1, where we started, where we've been, and where we're going. So the project itself started back in the end of 2012, 2013, with an initial contract with Grove Design Group to provide us with a conceptual drawing and comparison for the corridor of Topping Road. This is something that we utilized for some of our grant applications early on. Once the project was awarded grant funding, the mayor enacted a Topping Road task force to help guide and complete decision making for things such as engineering design firm, which side of the road the sidewalk would be on, and various components of the project. HR Green then in 2019, at the commission's request, provided a more in-depth conceptual comparison for both phases of the project, Phase 1 and Phase 2, east and west side designs. It kind of dove down more into property acquisition, impact of properties, landscaping, things of that nature to help the task force to make a recommendation. We then used that information for our open house. We sent out to property owners, over 400 property owners, either on Topping or in subdivisions adjacent to Topping, with over 50 residents in attendance of that open house to provide feedback and information. We then also created the Topping Road page on the city's website, provided information for property owners there, as well as notify me updates. And then from that open house, from 2019 to present, we've continued administrative actions to advance the project, which include preliminary design, right-of-way acquisition, and final design. The legislation associated with topping phase 1 and phase 2, again, began in 2012 with the ordinance for a program study and conceptual design with Grove Design Group. We then submitted grant applications from 2013 to 2017, increasing our match contribution each time. We started in 2013 at an 80-20 and were unsuccessful, and in subsequent years increased that percentage to a 50-50 match, which eventually awarded us the grant in 2017. We then in 2018 entered into a engineering contract for phase 1 with HR Green to perform the engineering design on the project. In conjunction with phase 1 design, we applied for grant applications for phase 2. The initial submittal in 18 was not awarded. We resubmitted in 19 and were awarded the grant in 2019 for phase 2. From that grant application and that open house, as a result of public feedback and comment, we withdrew our grant application for phase 2, and we modified our scope in phase 1 from an 8-foot wide multi-use trail to a 5-foot wide concrete sidewalk. In addition to changing the scope of phase 1, we also added non-participating components, including the paving of Topping Road in its entirety to complete all in one shot. In 2020, after the withdrawal of phase 1, we then entered into a second contract with HR Green for design work for phase 2, which is sidewalk only, from Topping Estates, Kent Manor at the north end to Pingree. Our last piece of legislation was most recent, our construction engineering and materials testing with Horner and Schifrin. So they will be providing project management, oversight, day-to-day inspections, logging of quantities, and completing all federal requirements that we have. Part of our process through topping phase 1 is a federal funded project. So our points of contact are MoDOT and federal highways. Every step of the process, we have to submit to MoDOT and then to federal highways for approval. The engineering funding was approved as part of the grant cycle in 2018. We then completed our environmental clearances, submitted in 19, cleared in 2020. Preliminary design was also submitted in January of 2020, approved March of 2020. From that, we requested authority to acquire right-of-way as part of the project. That submittal was done in April of 2020 and approved in June of 2020. In addition to the request for right-of-way acquisition, we have to, once acquired, we have to request clearance of that right-of-way, that we followed all federal guidelines and procedures to acquire the needed parcels. That request was submitted to MoDOT January of this year, 2021, and was approved May of this year, 2021. An additional component of the project in its entirety is utility coordination. Those coordinations began in March of 2020, were completed this summer with the final step of Missouri American Water relocating water main in several locations on Topping Road. That was completed in June of this year. From the point of getting our right-of-way clearance, our next step with Federal Highways and MoDOT is requesting authority to advertise for construction. Full plans are submitted, JSPs, the right-of-way clearance, utility clearance and coordination, all those documents are submitted for review. That was done in May of this year and approved in July. From that approval, we immediately put the bid package out for bid opening August of this year. We performed our bid opening. We took that lowest responsive bidder to our Public Works Commission for a recommendation, and you'll be seeing it later here tonight. For the project Topping Road Phase 1, our budget to date, we have spent just over $283,000. That includes our engineering, our right-of-way acquisition, recording fees, publications, any miscellaneous dollars that needed to be accomplished for this project. Of that $283,000, just under $105,000 have been submitted, and we have received reimbursement to date. Anticipated remaining expenses for 2021 for Phase 1, as we have budgeted just over $1.56 million to complete the project. Our remaining expenses, just over $24,000 remaining on the engineering contract for HR Green. This will allow them to provide some additional hours for clarifications with contractor on site for construction, or any clarification that Horner and Schifrin may need as part of the construction process. As previously stated, we still have $104,000 in contract with Horner and Schifrin for project management for the day-to-day oversight on the federal project and coordination and communication back to the city of those duties. From the bid opening, Krupp Construction was the lowest responsive bidder, just over $915,000, with a 10% contingency, just over $91,000. We do have some non-participating landscaping that's still outstanding for some of the property owners impacted adjacent to the project that we'll be putting out so that we can provide some additional warranty and guarantee information that we couldn't under the federal guidelines. So with a total budget remaining of $1.56 million, our anticipated remaining expenses are just under $1.2 million. We have slightly over $514,000 of those remaining dollars eligible for reimbursement, with a total overall cost for Phase 1 of $1.46 million, $618,000 for federal reimbursement, and a city out-of-pocket cost total of just under $850,000. Moving forward, what we have left to do for the project. As previously stated, HR Green has a small amount left for construction assistance and clarification as needed. Horner and Schifrin has nearly the full contract amount to provide construction project management, material testing, and project oversight. Krupp will have the construction contract upon their approval and prior to notice to proceed. They will provide us a schedule to outline the timing of construction components and the process in which they plan to move forward with construction. Ongoing communication to trustees and property owners will occur. We have a email system, a database of emails of impacted property owners that we communicate with. We will also provide updates on the city website, and for any major impact or information, we'll utilize Notify Me. Once the project is completed, we will have our post-construction performance evaluations that we'll provide to the impacted adjacent property owners to receive feedback on how we did with the project and things we can do better and things that we're doing pretty good with. Risk assessment. Moving forward, what do we have that could potentially happen? The remaining year, weather can impact construction. So while we hope to get this in 2021, we don't know how many rain days we'll have, when freeze will hit. So those are all things that will impact construction schedule. Material acquisition challenges. So once the contractor has an approved contract, they will begin acquiring the materials necessary to complete the project. And there may be difficulties with some of those products to acquire. We also have unknown subgrade conditions and undefined utilities. And this is fairly common with all, construction projects. So until you get in, you really don't know if, there are, again, a gas line that hasn't been previously identified that may cause some delays. That is the end of phase 1. For phase 2, sidewalk only, we do currently have budgeted for 2022 and hope to move forward with that as well. That's all I have.
Mr. Randick, that was an excellent presentation. I will open it for discussion, but I had a couple quick questions. On material acquisition, in addition to maybe having challenges acquiring it, what is the potential that suddenly the cost of material acquisition would become prohibitive from what we're thinking it is right now?
So the contractor has bid quantities and bid items. They will be required to hold that pricing regardless of whether they're able to acquire the materials this year or next. So that's a fixed price. They don't have an escalator that they can adjust that pricing.
Great, thank you. And the second one is, what is the likelihood that under the subgrade, we're going to find a gas line or other lines that we don't anticipate being there?
So we've done all of our utility coordinations. We've sent our plans out to every utility company: Spire, Missouri American Water, Ameren, Charter or Spectrum. So all utility companies have reviewed our plans and have cleared those utilities. Some which we might run into, and we have a JSP for any private utilities, so irrigation, low voltage wiring, dog fences. We have those accounted for. I don't anticipate that being an issue, but we were on a project earlier this year that there was an abandoned gas line that Spire didn't have identified on their master plan, and we had to sit for a day and wait for them to say this isn't live, you can go ahead and move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Randick. Is any of the aldermen, Alderman Allen?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple questions. And Tim, I do appreciate all the work you've put into this, as you do in everything. So I'm I appreciate the update from up to 18. I came on the board at 18. So I do remember some of the early meetings, the open house. We did change the scope. I know we talked about changes that have been made going back then as far as the legislation, when there was at one time an 80-20 match, and then it kind of changed to 50-50. Was there any or what was a level of concern, or were there any questions to move from an 80-20 project to a 50-50?
So every year that the city applies for a grant application, that request or resolution is submitted to the board for approval. Typically that grant cycle or that grant amount also has the expected funds or funding amount on it. Since this was identified as a priority, not only from the public works standpoint, from the roadway, but from the Parks and Trails Master Plan as a priority for connectivity and trails, it was desirable to continue to pursue the grant for topping. And based on the scoring criteria, it was determined in order to be awarded a grant, the city would have to be more aggressive. We would have to contribute more. So every year that we were not awarded the grant, staff looked at the grant submittal and what we could do to be more competitive, where we could get more points to be awarded the grant. And one of the last things that we could do was to continue to increase our percentage of share.
And so as we increased our points, and it looked like we were better off, we were actually paying a lot more money, correct? I mean,
Yeah.
we were having to come up with a lot more money. So, okay, then, okay, so yes, we went from the trail to the sidewalk. Now, do you consider the project in its entirety, both, you did mention project in entirety, that's both phases 1 and 2, correct? The road.
Yeah, so the initial scope for phase 1 was pedestrian component and roadway work to Kent Manor. That was Kent Manor to Clayton Road was phase 1. Phase 2 was pedestrian component and road work from Kent Manor to just past Pingree.
Yes.
So as part of the rescinding of the phase 2 grant and the modification of scope on phase 1, it was the board's direction, the topping task force recommendation, to switch from an 8-foot wide multi-use trail, 5-foot wide sidewalk, but
Right.
include all components of roadway to
All the way to Pingree.
yes, correct, to
Okay.
expedite that work.
Okay, so, and I appreciate the fact we will have project management. We know that's important, and we'll hear more about that later. As far as the city cost, right now, we were like around what, 850,000, but there are more factors that could add to that cost. Is that true? Or is that our bottom line?
So that includes all anticipated expenses. We do not, I do not anticipate, even with contingency or unknown, that we would exceed that total out-of-pocket cost for topping road phase 1.
But it could. Okay, then, okay, is there any, and I know it's hard to go back to 2013, but is there any way of determining the total cost to the city regarding staff time and every bit that the city has put into this project? And I'm assuming that's a no.
I don't know that we could track back to previous employees' hours that are no longer with the city and how much time they put in.
But as we move forward, are we going to be more cognizant of factors such as those? You see that happening?
Sue, that's probably, I'm sorry, Alderman Allen, probably a question for me. And I think we can maybe flush some of that out through the management partners report and the follow-up to those recommendations.
Right. Thank you. And thanks, Tim. I do appreciate all your work. And I know this is important. It's a road that needs to be fixed, but I just had to ask some questions. Thank you.
Sure. Any other Alderman Perot?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tim, job well done. Thank you so much for your effort. I did have one question related to phase 2, or actually 2 questions. What's the timeline on phase 2? And what's the cost of phase 2? Estimated cost.
Currently, we have, I believe it's roughly $150,000 budgeted for HR Green to complete the design of phase 2. So pending budget approval, that will begin 2022. This is locally funded. There is no federal funding with phase 2. So how fast or how slow we move forward will be dependent on the budget and the willingness of property owners along that phase to participate.
Thank you.
And I don't want to cut this off, but I want to make sure we start the meeting at 7. And I think the management partners review will take a little while. And I believe Mr. Borden is here now also. So Ms. McCray, why don't I turn it over to you for your and Mr. Borden's review for us.
Great, thank you. I do have a PowerPoint that I want to share
Thank you.
my screen so that you can all see it. And can you see my screen?
No.
It's black.
Yeah.
Yes.
I see it
Now
now.
it's there. It's there now.
It's here now. Okay, great. So thank you very much for allowing management partners to assist you with this important project, to do a public works project audit. The project team was myself and Tim Borden and 2 other associates, Sam Lieberman and Ashley Garcia. Just a little bit about management partners. We're local government consultants. We've been in business for over 27 years. I'm in the Cincinnati, Ohio office, and Tim Borden is out in California, and we have associates all across the United States. And many of us, over 90% of us, have all worked in local government. And so we love the work that local government leaders like yourselves do. And so that's our niche in the consulting world. As you all know, we were hired to look at 3 specific CIP projects: the Town Square, the Mason Road Pedestrian Trail Project, and the Clayton and Ballas intersection roadway and pedestrian improvement. And that's what we did. The bulk of the work was done by Tim Borden, and I'm going to be turning it over to him very shortly to go through his recommendations with you. But just a little bit about our methodology. We started off by talking to staff. We worked really closely with the city administrator, talked a lot with your public works manager, reviewed lots and lots of documents, talked to some community stakeholders. Did a really document by document review of ordinances and resolutions and other project documents as a part of our analysis to come up with, our recommendations, which are really based on best practices for CIP processes and the management of those processes. So, as a highlight to what Tim and I will share with you this evening, there's a really detailed report that I'm guessing that most, if not all of you have, but just a little bit about what's working well, as has been indicated with the Topping Road project. You all do a really good job of community engagement and outreach through your work groups and task forces and the Public Works Commission, and your neighborhood representative subcommittees. And so that's a process that's working very well. You do a great job in your contracting policies and agreements for consultants and contractors. While we have some recommendations to improve those, you do a good job of them now. And you do a good job, as evidenced by, the first presentation, of really striving for transparency on your CIP projects and your budgeting and your allocation of resources, so that your decision-making is really thorough and informed. Just a high-level overview about the 3 projects, and you all know them better than Tim and I. But Town Square, the project was initiated based on our assessment of city documents initiated in 2015. Was really the culmination of a really well-done community visioning project. City purchased the land, 8.8 acres in 2014, and then subsequently developed the project, which at a total cost of $8.7 million. And then the Madison Road Pedestrian Trail project was initiated a year earlier in 2014. There were some challenges with easement acquisitions. And so based on our analysis, the scope of that project was reduced, and then construction proceeded, but subsequently the Board of Aldermen decided and voted not to proceed with that project. And Tim will say a little bit more about that and recommendations related to projects so that this doesn't happen again. And then Clayton and Ballas intersection and roadway project and pedestrian improvement, initiated in 2013. And the property acquisition really became a roadblock to the city proceeding with this. Costs were too high. Properties were not purchased, and that project was subsequently canceled with the reimbursement of grant funds back to the Federal Highway Administration. So just a high-level overview of the 3 projects. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tim Borden to talk about the analysis and the 17 resulting recommendations. Tim?
Thank you, Jacqueline. Good evening, Mayor and Board. So I'll within these categories, I'll quickly go through the 17 recommendations with just a little bit of an explanation, and certainly we'll be happy to answer any questions at the end. So the first category of CIP budget, feasibility, and preliminary engineering. What we found was really the need to set a good scope, a feasible scope, budget, and schedule even before the initial project budget is approved. So establishing a preliminary engineering fund especially for the larger, more complex projects, so that this would be a fund that staff would charge to when a project is contemplated, or an engineer could be brought on board, engineering firm could be brought on board as well, to really look at issues like soils condition, property acquisition, utility conflicts, and look at jurisdictional or permitting complications that could go with the project. And then all that is really before the final scope, budget, and schedule are set by the board. And then the community and the engagement can go out and start working with a better definition of where obstacles may be with the project. Second recommendation is establishing procedures for scoping and preliminary engineering for projects, especially for ones that are expected to qualify for county municipal park grants or state or federal transportation grants, so that you're starting with a realistic project estimate, schedule, and scope. Third recommendation is really advancing that preliminary engineering phase of the project so you can determine if property acquisition is going to be necessary and get a feel for, is that going to be a major obstacle? So we found that as projects develop, sometimes that was not anticipated. And so to the extent that you can do that preliminary engineering and understand what will be necessary, that will help set the expectations for the project. The fourth recommendation is engage impacted property owners to determine if donation or acquisition with compensation will be feasible. Now, this is ideal. We understand that with some federal grants that you're not allowed to go out and do this engagement, but anytime that you can, go in determining whether this is going to be an obstacle or whether you have very cooperative property owners that are looking forward to the improvements. It makes a big difference on how that project schedule and budget are going to go. The next category is going to be on staffing and structure. So we're suggesting fill a vacant director position for the Public Works Department. So we understand that's been done. So we're happy to see one of our recommendations already in process. So very good there. We see that the looking at how the industry and cities of the size of Town and Country are staffed. Town and Country is staffed very lean. I think you do very well on your projects, your project managers, project management, and like Jacqueline said, the transparency and trying to engage the community is very good. But time is money, and if some of these projects can be delivered faster, you can reduce the risk of having surprises as the projects move along. If we can add some additional staff, such as an additional project manager, and then also hiring a project management firm for large, high visibility projects, highly complex projects, so that the projects can be on time and on budget. Your in-house project managers can focus on the rest of the CIP. And then finally hire an administrative assistant to focus on CIP support. So there's a lot of paperwork, a lot of documentation that goes with all CIP projects, no matter how complex. So it could be working with the public, doing all the noticing and agendas for the Public Works Commission. It's processing all of the contracts, the change orders, all the work that goes with the CIP projects, and that would allow the project managers to really focus on the day-to-day management of the contractor or the design of the projects and keeping those projects moving. The next category is going to be the relationship with St. Louis County Department of Transportation and Public Works. So that was also a common theme for a couple of the projects, whether it was needing St. Louis County's coordination or permitting, because you do have a lot of county jurisdictional roadways through the city. So recommendation is to request the assignment of a county project manager for large and complex joint projects involving St. Louis County. Now, we realize that this may not be fully within the city's control, but I think meeting at high levels within the county to request this type of support, especially for projects of mutual benefit and looking for that coordination and a single point of contact that would last through the life of the project. Establishing project expectations at the beginning will be very helpful. And then also establishing a joint project team for projects that require city and county involvement or a county permit. So again, having the county staff understand what the project is, what the timing is, what they should be looking for, and then also understand what to expect as far as turnaround times on permitting would be very helpful. The next category is the CIP reporting and transparency. So the recommendation 11 is that we provide routine updates to the Board of Aldermen about the status of capital improvement projects, much like we just heard earlier, including the running project total rather than simply the project budget. So looking at staff costs, looking at all your engineering costs, everything that's included in a project, seeing that brought to the board with a running total is what we're recommending there. Recommendation 12, creating project links on the city's website that will provide the public with the same type of information about project updates and timelines, as well as the status and budget appropriation information. And then recommendation 13, develop procedures and forms to document change order requests, analysis, and costs. So when there is a change, change orders they happen on the best of projects. They're not always bad, but having the board and the public understand that the city is getting the best price on those change orders is helpful. It's understanding that how the change order, the need for the change order came about, what the negotiation was, and how it was determined that what a fair price is for that change order, and having that all documented. Then we'll go to capital improvement planning and programming. Our first recommendation there is to budget funds to study the feasibility for large and potentially complex projects prior to or concurrent with the work of an appointed task force or committee. So these are really the larger projects. So we talked about a preliminary engineering fund on more routine, maybe a little bit larger projects, but these are your large projects that just come around once in a while. Actually doing a feasibility study and having that budgeted and get the findings from that feasibility study, project challenges, obstacles, and then have that before the budgeting, the scheduling, and the scoping of the project occurs. Number 15, annually budget funds to support on-call cost estimating firms. So when complex projects or proposed estimates can be prepared by the firm. So this is fairly common in the industry, where you have a firm that specializes in construction cost estimating. They're keeping tabs with all of the different markets, and they can give you a good estimate at the very beginning of the project, so that you can be more assured that the variances as you move forward will be eliminated. Next, last category is the deviations and changes in the project scope. So in this, the first recommendation is to document capital project scope and details with the initial budget appropriation as included in the city's capital budget document and other staff reports. So as often as you can in any document that talks about projects, I think it's important to document the scope so that everyone understands what the project really is. And if that scope changes, it's very public, it's very documented, and the new scope is published. So what is included in the scope, what's not included in scope is very important to be documented, in the budget document, on the city's website. If there's a project website, it ought to be first and foremost, the scope is that important. And then lastly, clearly document design amendments to the project scope and include the corresponding impact to the CIP budget and schedule and staff report. So anytime there is a change in scope, the budget, and the schedule really need to be seen as a three-legged stool. If the scope changes in the same breath, you need to be talking about what the impacts are to the budget and to the schedule. All of those need to go hand in hand in any of your public documents that you're reviewing. If you see that a project scope is being adjusted, you should also be asking, or you should see that the budget and the schedule are either they're likely going to be impacted. If not, it should be said that they're not going to be impacted. So that is our 17 recommendations based on our understanding of the projects.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I will want to make one quick comment, then I'll open it up to board members for questions. But my thought is they have 17 recommendations. I think we've actually instituted one of them in terms of public works. But to discuss 16 recommendations in under 15 minutes is probably not going to be productive. So not wanting to volunteer other people's times, but I think we'll probably have to find a separate time for the Board of Aldermen to get together in the near future to actually kind of discuss these recommendations in detail, see how they apply to us and our community, and what's the best way we can make use of this information. But so that will be in our near future. But in the meantime, while we have the folks from Management Partners here, if someone, Alderman Whitmire.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you very much for your work and thanks for your report. I wondered if you could reconcile 2 points for me. It's regarding staffing, setting aside the position that we just filled, your report indicates that we should hire 2 more staff plus contractors to administer our programs. At the same time, your report indicates that prior to these 3 projects, our CIP projects were generally considered successful and non-controversial. Can you reconcile those 2 points for me? You're saying, hey, it worked before, it's not working now. The solution is to hire more people.
So I think I'd say there's really two points to that. I think that the scheduling for public works projects, I think if you can deliver projects faster, and you are going to need more staff if you want to do that. Just with cost escalation, especially today, you're going to save money if you're able to deliver these projects faster. But then also just risk. So your risk of having mistakes made along the way, finding things that weren't anticipated. We just think that looking at cities of similar size to Town and Country, it's very often the fact that there is a couple of project managers and an administrative assistant that's really focused to supporting those projects. The city has a CIP averaging, probably at least 2 million per year, which is sizable for your size. And so we do see that in similar sized cities with similar sized CIP, the public works staff to push those projects along are larger. It's true that really things had been going very well. Most projects are doing just fine, but they could go faster and you could reduce any possibility for risk.
Thank you.
I am not seeing anyone else raising their hand, and that being the case, Mr. Alderman Whitmire.
Well, then I'll follow up with a follow-up question related to the point. So it sounds like you did some level of benchmarking. So you looked at the complexity of the projects that we undertake, the number of projects we undertake, and the amount of money that we're spending every year. It's all the 3 of those things, right? And you benchmarked that against similar cities, and you're saying, Jeff, you guys are short compared to other cities of similar size with similar complexity. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that there are other cities that operate a very lean CIP, and I'd say that's the category the city's in. And again, just to push those projects faster and with less risk of hiccups along the way, that's our recommendation.
And if no one else has questions, I have yet another follow-up on a different subject.
Fire away.
So in a different part of your report, you referred to actually it was in attachment B, you talked about Town Square, the town square project and a difference in the total project cost as determined by you versus as, reported by the city. And that number was fairly material in terms of the difference. Where were those numbers? Were they allocated somewhere else, or do we not really do allocations on a regular basis? So they just weren't allocated. And I guess, do you understand my question, first of all?
If I could interject a little bit here, and I think some of the people, the aldermen who have been around longer than I have, but I believe from what I've unearthed and been told and communicated is that I think the initial price that went out in terms of what it would cost to develop did not include the cost of acquisition of the land. And so all of a sudden you have another, I don't know, 2.2 million or something on top of what the original price was quoted. And then you have the change orders. I don't know if it all completely lines up and resolves, but I think, and I'm open to anyone else who wants to jump in here on that, but from my review, that the initial cost of developing the park, the square, did not include the cost of the land acquisition. And I think that was part of where it all started going a little bit off the tracks. But I'm open to anyone else who wants to weigh in there on that.
The one thing that I would note that on one of the things that we found that I think we finally did find the answer to it, but it really wasn't clear. But the reports that were going to the board, updating the cost of the project, as change orders occurred, and so you were seeing routine costs. Those were coming from the Public Works Department. And not your finance department. So I think what happened was on one of the change orders, there was, it was an additional amount for the change order, but also included within that Public Works report was a credit from an earlier action on the project that really wasn't explained. So I think that was one of the things that where there was a change order that increased it a certain amount, but in fact there was a credit of about $100,000. So that also got off from how we were tracking the budget with what was going to the board at the time. So it was the Public Works tracking the costs rather than finance providing that update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank Ms. McCray and Mr.
Yes.
Bolden
Thank you.
for taking time out, for doing the audit, and also for taking time out to come to our meeting and give us an explanation. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you for allowing us to assist you. We appreciate it.
Great. We have about 6 or 7 minutes before 7 on the rest of the agenda in terms of minutes or public hearings or warrant list. Does anyone have anything they want to bring up before we start our meeting? Alderman Hughes?
No, I'm
No,
fine.
okay,
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
I'm good.
Then I guess we have about 5 or 6 minutes, and I'm sorry we're not in person. I am encouraged by the fact that there has been over the last 3 days, a somewhat significant decrease in the number of new COVID cases in our state. And hopefully that's a harbinger for good things going forward in the very near future. We can only hope. And I'll see you all